You're listening to Don't Waste Water.
Having been in membranes for a very long time, doesn't work at all.
Hello, bonjour, and welcome to the Don't Waste Water podcast.
I think the most important thing is never give up. Small company, startup, scale up. It is difficult. There's many challenges. A lot of things that you do not have this big organization around you that, takes all kinds of work off your table. You will have a lot of setbacks, but never give up.
I'm your host, Antoine Walter, and in today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Stephan van Hoof as my guest.
My first slide in every single of those trainings said a membrane is not a box. You cannot just, sell a membrane, put it on transport and hope that it's going to work because it will fail. 100% guaranteed.
Stephan is the CEO of BlueFoot Membranes.
That really sounds nice. So can you build it? And then the answer is always, no, we can't. But we got a really good partner that can help you out there.
BlueFoot Membranes is redefining water treatment by providing unbreakable membrane technology that transforms wastewater into reusable clean water.
Everybody's just, sort of talking about sustainability and water, but are we now taking action and actually doing things? Some of them are. Many of them are still, I think, struggling with that.
And before we start, let me thank my sponsors, Simple Lab and BlueFoot Membranes.
I've talked to many investors. I was kind of surprised by the lack of knowledge.
Three things before we start. Yes, BlueFoot is at the same time the sponsor and the guest of this episode, but let me say that if one triggered the other, it's not the way you think. Actually, at Aquatech 2021, yes, the special one, the intimate one in the direct aftermath of COVID, I met with Stephan and his crew of people wearing blue shoes. And I invited him to the podcast and it didn't happen. Then I invited him again a couple of years ago, but it didn't happen. And then BlueFoot became my sponsor and I reminded him that I'd like to discuss BlueFoot's take on MBR membranes on the show, and this time I guess he had no choice but to accept. So no, this is not a glorified ad, but my genuine exploration of BlueFoot's thesis that a third way is possible. Because, and that's the second thing, you might recall my interview with Andrew Benedek, the legend behind Xenon, or said differently, the first madman that thought that ultrafiltration membranes belonged to wastewater treatment. And as much as he explained at the time how it felt like crossing a desert without knowing if there was something on the other end, well, according to Global Water Intelligence, as of 2024, 80% of ultrafiltration membranes and 74% of ultrafiltration systems nowadays are deployed in wastewater treatment applications. That's, give or take, a €5 billion market, and one that for long was the kingdom of Xenon-inspired forks, polymeric membranes, tubular or flat sheet. And that's where I'm bringing in the third element I wanted to recall in this introduction, because this time, if you were around at the time that interview aired, you're a real one who was willing to endure me presenting my guest like that. I have the incredible honor to welcome Graham Pierce as my guest, while we put membrane bioreactors under the spot. At the time, we were wondering with Graham if ceramics could make a dent in polymerics dominancy over the MBR field, and we were listing advantages they had, like being able to backwash or be more resistant overall, as drivers for their potential adoption. Now, that being said, and still according to Global Water Intelligence, this takeover is somewhat limited so far at a 7% market share versus polymerics 93%. I know and I hear that there are circles in the water to make a Jurassic Park analogy with recent projects, but the projected revolution is still to come. And this brings me back to a conversation I had many times where someone tells me that ceramics will inevitably take over polymerics, the argument being that they are superior in almost everything but the cost, and as costs will go down, they will become obvious. To which my devil's advocate objection is yes, but what if polymerics became better as well? Or even more probably, what if a different material was to take over everyone? And this is how, despite me still not being a membrane guy or a membrane expert by any stretch of the imagination, we've had conversations here of graphene membranes, sweeter ionic membranes, and a quantity of additional tweaks on the good old membrane, ranging from spacers to vortexes through aquaporin layers and hopefully soon electroactive enhancements. But that picture wouldn't be exhaustive without BlueFoot's take introducing a new player in the game, a 3D polyester textile that encapsulates PVDF-UF, with the claim to combine all the advantages of the above, as Stephan will explain in a minute. So in today's packed conversation, you'll learn how BlueFoot combines the best features of flat sheet, tubular and ceramic membranes into one unbreakable solution, but also their journey from VITO spin-off to scaling a disruptive membrane technology with OEM partnerships across Europe, Southern Asia and Australia. We'll discuss the real-world benefits of 50% lower energy consumption and compact footprint, why BlueFoot strategic fundraising of 15 million euros supports their ambitious 2028 target of 40 million euro revenue, and how breakthrough membrane technology is enabling water reuse in challenging industrial applications like breweries and slaughterhouses. All of that and more right after I remind you that if you like what you hear, please take this episode and share it with a colleague, a friend, your boss or your team. Reach out to me if you have any critics or suggestions as of things you'd like me to cover better. Thanks for all your overwhelmingly kind messages week after week, but really hit me if you believe I deserve it, and I'll meet you on the other side. Hi, Stephan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm super happy to have you because we met here 3 years ago to start with the bank. When you talk about NBR membranes, usually you have the people saying flat sheets is the best. And the one who say tubular the best, they say, hey, you have nothing with those two because what you need is ceramics. And if I get you right, you're like saying all of those have merits. Awesome. Nice to be there. We have all of that. So what's the trick?
The trick is that we really combine the advantages of all of the above. I think you see the structure of the membrane. Really, it's based on a 3D textile on both sides of which we cast a membrane layer. What's unique about that is that this membrane layer is completely anchored into that textile. So if you just compare it to, the run-of-the-mill flat sheet, for example, those membranes use a very thin sheet, which is like glued or spot welded or whatever to a backing plate. And that means it's not completely anchored to that backing plate. So you cannot really backwash it. I know some vendors claim, well, we can backwash with 100 millibar, 200 millibar, but for all intents and purposes, on the process side, that's not really backwashing. What we can do is apply a pressure of up to 2 bars on that inside, actually backwashing the membrane. In the process, we don't really use that 2 bar because permeability is so high that you don't really need it. But just to show the strength and the robustness and the durability of the membrane, every single membrane sheet that we produce, and I mean, 100% of these membrane sheets are being tested during manufacturing at 2 bar. We now have a membrane that is sort of in a flat sheet form, however, has the functionality of what you would expect from a capillary submerged membrane. So there you have a combination already of those two, the best of those two worlds, the two form factors. On top of that, what we see is the robustness of the membrane itself, and that's why we're pretty comfortable saying, this is an unbreakable membrane. And that's sort of where the comparison with ceramics comes in. It is very robust. It is also flexible, which ceramics obviously is not. That's why we say we really take the best of all of these 3 worlds, combine it into one membrane, and that's what makes this truly unique.
But if I try to deconstruct that, lots of advantages is cool, but what we want is the benefits. So what is the unique, absolute thing where customers say, oh, that's the one?
How do these technical features translate into customer benefits? Because of the fact that we can backwash the membrane, we can keep it in a cleaner state. So that means you run at higher elevated fluxes compared to what flat sheet does. That also means that you have a very compact system. We've got some other features there. We can stack the membranes on top of each other. So we have a very, very compact footprint. That provides a number of advantages to the customer because none of our end customers are really in the business of wastewater treatment. They're in the business of making widgets, producing beer, whatever it is. Wastewater and the treatment of wastewater and the reuse of wastewater is for them certainly a license to operate, although sometimes I doubt that every single end user really realizes that, but it's certainly a license to operate. No water, no production, whatever you make. But typically it's sort of, ideally as small as possible at the back of the lots. It needs to work, obviously, but it's certainly not part of the core process of whatever it is that somebody produces. Again, compactness is certainly an advantage there. It also provides some CapEx advantages because obviously if you can build something more compact, you have smaller tanks, you pour less concrete, etc., etc. That's one side. The other side is the fact that the aeration rate that we use is very, 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 very low. Typically, if you compare it to a regular flat sheet membrane, about 50% of your even lower than a regular flat sheet membrane. That translates into lower energy costs. That translates into lower CO2 emissions, which luckily is getting higher on the priority list of many end customers. That's an advantage there as well. Those are the main benefits for the end customer. And the fact, again, coming back to the backwashing, that we can actually keep the membrane clean, also provides a lot of operational flexibility, if you will. So in terms of, peak flow handling, which is important for some customers, not for all, but for some customers, it's certainly something that's the strength of the membrane too.
We're going to deconstruct all of those and go to the depth of BlueFoot, but before we do that, let's start with a one-sentence elevator pitch. How do you present BlueFoot if I never heard about you?
It is the critical ingredient for any wastewater treatment plant based on membrane bioreactors, and we provide the most robust and reliable membrane combined with the lowest total cost of ownership.
You said several times reliable. What I picked up is unbreakable. Is there a difference between reliable and unbreakable?
The fact that
Your lawyer might disagree.
yeah. Let's not go there. They're sort of intertwined. So the fact that the membrane is very robust makes it very reliable. In a wastewater treatment plant, things will go wrong. That's the only thing that you know for sure. You don't know how often, you don't know when, but things will go wrong. And it really depends on, the design of the plant, the operator that's actually working on the plant, something that may go wrong in the factory. Monday morning, somebody just drains a big tank, goes into the bioreactor and things end up upset there, but things will go wrong. And then the question is, how are you able to recover from that? And how are you able to, clean your membrane, get the treatment going again? I think there is where we excel.
Let's go back to the story. You have a personal membrane story, which goes back long time.
30 years.
Okay, use that.
But you've been more on the bigger groups and
And on some of the pioneers, when you've been with Norway 6 Flow, those are the people who made all of that what it is today. Then you switch gears in 2015, if I'm right, and you go to, I have all that knowledge. How do I help those companies to scale up? And so now you're scaling up and helping companies scale up. Before we go to the BlueFoot element, to those companies, what is the number one of the advice you gave them and said, okay,
if you want to scale this thing up, here's what you should do?
I think the most important thing is never give up. Small company, startup, scale up. It is difficult. There's many challenges. A lot of things that you do not have this big organization around you that, takes all kinds of work off your table. You will have a lot of setbacks, but never give up. Of course, there's the obvious things of, does your product work from a technical point of view? Does it do what you're saying that you do? Are you in the right market? Is there a market fit? Does it make, not just from a technical point of view, sense, but from an economical or commercial point of view, does it make sense? Because I think many startups, I shouldn't say many, but certainly a number of startups start thinking a bit too late about, is this great idea that I have viable in the real world? It's good to have somebody from the outside say, well, look into the mirror and tell me how that's going to work. I believe your technical solution, but how is that going to work?
Do you still do that nowadays, or you have absolutely no?
No. Now my focus is 100%, more than 100% on BlueFoot. Yeah.
So tell me about your encounter with BlueFoot, because I tried to put the timelines, and BlueFoot was spun off from VITO in 2017.
Correct.
And you're joining as a CEO in 2020.
Yeah.
I'm just fantasizing that you have been working with them before that and that you ended up jumping ship, but I might be fully wrong. So what's the story?
I have been working a little bit with them because in I think it was 2015 or 16 probably, VITO was thinking of spinning out the technology into a new company, got some investors involved. And one of the things that they wanted to look at is, where is this membrane? The technical story is very nice, but how does it stack up to whatever's in the market? So I did a little bit of work for them at that time. And frankly, I was kind of impressed with the membrane. And that might sound a bit strange coming from me because obviously, for the better part of 20 years, I've been working on capillary membranes that were operated inside out and that were certainly not submerged. And now I'm talking about something that is submerged, that is outside in, essentially a flat sheet form factor. It was a complete 180. I was kind of impressed with the membrane, just making the analysis. They went on, they had somebody from VITO come on board, be the CEO, got Peter on board as a CTO, and then I went on to do other things, completely other things, outside of water treatment, outside of membrane filtration. But then in 2020, the shareholders contacted me again. He said, well, we think we're sort of ready for a next step. We're now out of the lab. There is this manufacturing facility already in Belgium. We've done a couple of projects, a couple of references. We need to take the next step. They came back to me and said, well, is this something that we could discuss? I was very excited at that time, say, well, this is, for me personally, a really great challenge and a very nice opportunity. I have a technical background. I've been in between the technology and the commercial side for most of my life. I really like that sort of in between. And now doing this with a small team, trying to create something bigger from something that's very small. That was a great challenge.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to quickly thank my sponsor, Simple Lab. If you're in the water industry and you're running a water quality sampling campaign or tweaking plant process performance, Simple Lab has you covered. You can easily order online from over 275 commercial labs. Simply put, Simple Lab is a one-stop shop for everything from routine testing kits to specialized analyses like PFAS or microplastics. You don't have to juggle multiple labs and complicated logistics anymore. Instead, you get a single, streamlined process for ordering kits and reviewing results. Plus, there's always a real person to talk to, so if you're tired of cobbling together lab documents and quotes and services for each new requirement, or you just want to try a new way for more efficient testing of water samples, check out Simple Lab. They're all about making water quality testing, well, simple. So head to their website, the link is in the description, line up the tests you need, hit order, and let them handle the rest. Thanks Simple Lab for supporting my work. Check them out to support me, and back to me.
So when you get on board in 2020, you mentioned small team. How small was the team at the time?
So everybody, including production, was 11.
But there was already a production muscle. So you were producing your membranes yourself, not in a lab fashion, more in a small shop.
Yes.
What is the first thing you built?
The first thing that I did was to change the commercial strategy. The original thinking was much more, okay, we have this great product. We're going to manufacture these products, membrane modules. We're going to engage with distributors. We'll have the distributors sort of sell the products into the world. Having been in membranes for a very long time, that doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. First thing I did is adopt a very clean OEM strategy, trying to sell partnerships. We had one partnership with a system integrator in Belgium, Panterijn Water, who, I mean, we will be eternally grateful to them. They've really, kickstarted the company, but we really need to expand that. So started looking for potential partners, obviously within my network, within some of my colleagues' networks, and set those up.
But that means that from the get-go, BlueFoot was producing the modules. You never had part of your business plan to just do the membranes.
No.
Membrane companies need to find where they put the limits to it. Because if you sell just a membrane, well, people say, hey, how do I do modules? Then you do the module, and people say, how do I integrate? Then you integrate, and where do you put the threshold? If I get you right, you have that partner in Belgium, great vehicle for growth, because now you have an OEM with some market exposure, and then
references building. Yeah.
Now, if I play the David's advocate, that also means that the competitors of that OEM
might be thinking, okay, BlueFoot is a feature of them, it's not for us, and then you limit your reach.
I mean, sure, there's been a bit of discussion about that, but there's many system integrators and OEMs in the world that are looking for a proper membrane solution. And with a membrane solution, I don't mean membranes. I mean, just selling membranes to me, or membrane modules for that matter, doesn't make any sense. When I was still at Norad, I had a large technical team. We regularly did customer training. So we got people from all over the world come into the Netherlands, and we sat down with them for about 4 days, do technical trainings. My first slide in every single of those trainings said, a membrane is not a box. You cannot just, sell a membrane, put it on transport, and hope that is going to work, because it will fail. 100% guarantee. So what do you need to do? You need to not just only provide the membrane module, you need to provide what I like to call the implementation know-how. And that's why I think the partnerships that we build up are so important, because I don't just want to engage with the sales side from my customers. I really want to engage with their technical guys. I really need their process engineers to completely understand the membrane, how it should be integrated, what's important, what to do, what not to do, help them with P&IDs, process descriptions, process control philosophies, what have you, because I think that's the only way to guarantee that what you sell will work in practice. And that's really what we want to achieve. First and foremost, to me, working references are important. If you have issues, you solve the issues. Everybody has issues, but the membranes need to work.
So what you're saying is that you're not going to leave your OEM out there in the fields and in the deserts.
If anything happens, you jump in, you're part of the same team, so you need to be part of the same team for that to work.
But you do that beforehand already. You engage with these partners and again, set up technical trainings, a system in general, but also a system with specific projects. As a matter of fact, I had a Teams call this morning with the technical team of one of our customers, and we were just discussing the technical details. How do we do this? How do we do, an N+1 configuration of this particular tank? So what if something goes wrong? That's the kind of interaction that you really need. And that's the kind of knowledge that you need to have and need to be able to offer to your customers to be successful. That's my conviction anyway.
Discussing the knowledge is one thing. Now the question is, where do you put the boundary? Because you could also go to process warranties. One of your claims is to be 50% lower in energy than the typical membrane. You can put it on paper, and then people design it, and if it doesn't work, say, sorry, it's in given conditions. Or you can say, wait a minute, we also stand for that. Granted, you do all of the steps that we advise.
When you are in a partnership, then certainly the initial project might go something like this. You create a very clearly defined envelope of boundaries saying, okay, if these are the process conditions, if from a process point of view, you as a system integrator can make sure that this is going to happen, then we will be able to provide these types of guarantees. And then once you sort of develop the relationship and you got a couple of plans running and everybody's comfortable, then it's not a topic anymore. It's much more a partnership, and you go in there together.
I agree with you, but contracts are always made for the cases where it goes wrong.
Sure.
And so there's always a moment where someone will want to see, where do I put my liability money, because it's an insurance I need to take. Yeah. Is that on your books? Is that on the OEM books? Is that on the end user book? Who's taking the risk?
You will expect this answer. The answer is it depends. It depends. Yeah. There is no one size fits all. We are happy to stand behind the claims that we make, but we also need to make sure that you have some sort of a control on the environment, because as you know very well, any membrane is going to be heavily influenced by the environment. The feed water coming in, or the sludge, or in our case with membrane bioreactors, how well or how poorly is the bioreactor performing? Is everything okay in the bioreactor? There's a huge influence on filterability, on capacity, on TMP evolutions. That's something that you need to contain. That makes it a little bit more complex.
You build up that OEM relationship. I guess it would be impolite of you to build more OEMs within the existing market.
No, why?
Tell me.
I don't really believe in, not in exclusive relationships based on, for example, a particular market or a particular reason, because I don't think that makes sense. We're happy to make an arrangement on a project by project basis, and we do. That's our way of protecting that customer from, 3 other bidders that might be working on the same project and trying to get the same technology in there. That's the more practical way of doing it, because an exclusivity, that's a two-way street, right? I don't work with anybody else, but my customer also cannot work with anybody else. And as much as you might want to do that, I much more see it, as a relationship that has to have a mutual benefit. And if sometimes you come to the conclusion, or one of the parties comes to the conclusion, well, in this specific case, maybe not, fine. I think that's the way to work together.
I'm open to an open relationship.
Okay, you're tempting me here. Tricky question. In which specific case would they not work with you?
If, for example, the end customer says, whatever happens, I want that membrane supplier in there for whatever reason.
The conservatism of the industry might sometimes kick out. Yeah. It's one thing to go project by project, let's say we go together. The other thing is that if now a different OEM is in the game and you've never worked with them and there's an element of onboarding, well, you need to be onboarding new ones so that you have more cards available. So how do you proactively do that?
We are very open for new partnerships. We were actively looking for new partnerships with OEMs. We try to do that in such a way that we don't, have a whole bunch of inherent conflicts to very much neighboring system integrators in the exact same market. Maybe not such a good idea, but for sure, we are globally expanding. We're doing well in Europe, but there's a lot of area to cover. We have some presence in Southeast Asia now. Got some plans running already, also in Australia.
Western Europe, Southern Asia, Australia. How do you handle the geographies? Because usually when people start in Western Europe, then they go to Eastern Europe and maybe they go to Middle East. But you're saying, okay, we don't care about time zones.
No. But, that's maybe the funny and the nice thing about a scale up as well. Certainly in the beginning, you have to be very opportunistic. So in this particular case, our presence in Southeast Asia just came about because 4 or 5 years ago, one of my colleagues had a relationship down there in Malaysia with a company from his former work and sort of gradually developed that. Long story short, we built a couple of plants with them, and there we have a couple of references in Indonesia in this case. There we are opportunistic. Right now, while we are growing and while we have the opportunity to also, build out the sales organization, which we're doing actively right now, you can go about it in a more strategic or planned manner. Northwest Europe, for sure, that's our home turf. We've got covered. We have now somebody in Eastern Europe as well, Southern Europe as well, specifically for the DACH region. Middle East, we are currently actively looking at because that's frankly kind of a white spot right now. And we recently opened an office in Singapore just to be able to much more support the customers down there and expand the market over there. But again, because we already had a presence in terms of references, it sort of made sense to have somebody on the ground there. And that's how we try to expand the organization.
Let me bring you back to the technical side of it. I mentioned that claim you have of reducing the energy by 50%. First, it's good because the threshold in this industry is, depending who you ask, 20 or 30%. If you're less than 20 or 30% better, then people will simply not look at you and will not bother trying. 50%, they definitely will bother trying. How do you come up with those 50%? So what do you count there? Is it in specific conditions, specific applications, specific verticals? Is there like a golden spot in which you're even north of those 50%? Let's break it down.
The 50%, in all fairness, is a comparison with, let's call it conventional, classical flat sheet,
which is still the vast majority.
Yeah, you're right. But so that's sort of the baseline. So that's what we have been looking at. Then coming back again to the fact that we can stack these modules, we have a very compact footprint. We're actually able to just use about 50%, sometimes even a little bit less, I should say, aerations. So that's sort of the baseline where that came from. We've actually done a specific project that was evaluated based on total cost of ownership, 10 years total cost of ownership. So energy was a really important factor in there. And that one, we won on the total cost of ownership. So basically on the lower aeration rate there.
Where I'm heading with that is that we know how the water sector is conservative and...
No, really?
Once we pass that platitude, it means that you cannot just come with a claim on a PowerPoint or a brochure. People will want to test it out. And then the second thing is when they want to test it out, if you test it out with their neighbor, they're like, oh, they're 500 meters from me. Nothing to do with me.
Completely different. Yeah.
So I want it to be tested with me. So do you need to do every time pilots, then proven, then it gets standard, and then you win? Or did you pass that phase and it is now accepted?
We passed that phase. To be fair, the vast majority of our applications are industrial for a good reason. That market is just a bit, well, I think a lot faster, although fast is still relative in that sense. I think industrial customers tend to be a little bit more pragmatic, one, and two, and again, that's where the partnership relationship comes in. Once you have established these partnerships, there's a level of comfort between those partners that, okay, well, we've seen this work on this spot or in that project or in that pilot, because sometimes they do pilots, but not for every project. So that gives us enough comfort to use the same data for a different project. So no, we're well past having to do a pilot every single time. However, as you say, there are still some customers saying, well, it works in my neighbor's place, but this is different. And okay, we have the capability to do pilots. That happens.
Let me pause here for a second to ask you a question. Have you ever heard of a membrane that refuses to break? It sounds unusual, but it's true. Meet BlueFoot Membranes, a Belgian company that has developed the first and only unbreakable membrane specifically designed for MBR, if you're new here, membrane bioreactor applications. This technology is setting a new standard in wastewater treatment. Water engineers and industry experts have tested this membrane, and no matter how much they pull and twist, the membrane holds strong. Now, it's not just about membranes, it's also about an award-winning and passionate team that doesn't take impossible as an answer. The people at BlueFoot Membranes are driven by a mission to make wastewater reuse the new standard, united by a shared purpose to leave a blue footprint on the world. So yes, they manufacture cool membranes, but they also push the boundaries of what's possible in MBR technologies. To learn more about them, check the link to their website in the description. A big thanks to BlueFoot Membranes for sponsoring this episode, and back to me.
You mentioned how a module should not be a black box. It depends to whom. Because if I get you right, it's not a black box to your OEM. We need to understand the guts and in and out, but it might be a black box to the end user, and that's fine.
To an extent. A proper OEM strategy is not just talking to your partners, but is also talking to the end customers. We do not sell to our end customers because, again, that would be a conflict with our partners. And like I said, we have a very clear, transparent, 100% OEM strategy. However, what we do is reach out to various end customers just to make them aware of the technology, to show them the opportunities for them and maybe the comparison with whatever they have and might have problems with or whatever the case may be. And that has, in many instances, resulted in end customers saying, well, that really sounds nice. So can you build it? And then the answer is always, no, we can't, but we got a really good partner that can help you out there. Then you take the OEM to the end customer. And then I think the relationship also works both ways. Then that means that now I have an advantage or a present, if you will, for my partner. It's good for everybody. It's good for the end customer because his problem is being solved. It's good for the OEM. He has a project. It's good for me because we can use our membranes.
You mentioned those end users. Is there like one spectacular one, which is a typical case of what you want to do more, where you can tell us the story?
There's been a lot of publicity around, for example, Carlsberg. Our partner in Belgium actually built a complete water treatment plant at Carlsberg containing our membranes. I'm particularly proud of that because I was so happy to see that now we have an end customer saying we have a really strict goal towards our own water use. And we, despite the fact that they're a food and beverage industry, we're for sure open to look at reuse. And they do a lot of reuse. I think that's really where we really need to take the whole industry. So that's one. Another one is Rendoc, which is a rendering company. They have an existing conventional wastewater treatment plant that was basically refurbished with our membranes, just sort of a bolt-on solution, providing them with a very good water quality, potentially be able to be reused as well.
That was the first time that you were refurbishing a different plant.
Yeah, but a non-membrane plant. So that was a conventional plant. A similar application is one that we have with a partner in Poland that is treating wastewater from a chicken slaughterhouse. A very challenging application. Every rendering slaughterhouse meat, those are definitely very challenging applications.
The refurbishing one is the one that caught my eye because most of the waste and waste infrastructure was built around the 60s, 70s. I know that Brussels was a bit later with that, but where I'm heading with that is that there is an end of life for many process steps, but maybe not for the concrete tank. So one of the ideas is to say, okay, it would be stupid to erase everything and rebuild it. We could refurbish. And while we're refurbishing, water scarcity is not exactly what it was 40 years ago. So maybe we should go to higher uses of water and hence reuse, which means converting to MBRs becomes a very interesting take. So if you have a solution to more or less do a drop-in replacement and say, hey, you have those brown jacuzzis, turn them into an MBR and reuse your water, you have a strong position.
Absolutely. But you make a good point. In terms of the type of projects that we are involved in, I like to sort of distinguish 4 of them. One, obviously, is a greenfield, nothing there. You need to build something new. You build an MBR. The second one is exactly what you're saying. There is an existing conventional wastewater treatment plant. It has to be refurbished. I have issues with my discharge limits. I want to start reusing the water, whatever the reason may be. You refurbish that plant, put in sort of like I said, a bolt-on solution with membranes, and now all of a sudden you're extracting a much higher quality of water that you can use in reuse scheme. Everybody's just, sort of talking about sustainability and water, but are we now taking action and actually doing things? Some of them are. Many of them are still, I think, struggling with that. Third one, obviously, is there are many, many MBRs. And we think we are a very good replacement option for membranes that have to be replaced, whether they're end of life or they have other issues.
So you could also be refurbishing the MBRs.
Exactly. And the nice thing is, again, because of the compactness, we always fit. In many cases, we say, well, okay, with your existing infrastructure, you can exchange the membranes and you will have the capacity that you have, but there's still room. If you need capacity expansion, you can still put that in there without having to do anything on the existing infrastructure. And number 4, obviously, is all the mobile solutions. So many of our customers are standardizing on mobile wastewater treatment solutions using our membranes. Again, the compactness comes in very, very handy. They're transportable. They can be deployed very, very rapidly, solving an end customer's issue on the wastewater side.
Going back to number 3, because just curiosity question, there's a park of established MBRs and there are some big brands. One strategy would be to say, hey, we have replacement kits for, let's say, Z-Weight. The design is already done, plug and play. Take it. Is that an approach for you?
The first that we are focusing on is much more the flat sheet. If you look at Z-Weight replacement, just look around at the show, I think I counted like 5 or 6 or 7 companies that actually have drop-in replacements for Z-Weight.
You prefer going in the blue ocean than in the red ocean. Understandable. Company building question.
You raised end of 2023, 2-stage fundraise.
Correct.
There was 10 and 5 million. For a total of 15 million. What do you use that money for?
Need to go back a little bit because in probably 22-ish, we were at the stage with the company that we were growing, but kind of organically. I really wanted to expand the sales organization. And when you're a small company, then obviously that takes a lot of money. So that money wasn't there. So I went back to my investors and said, listen, we can take this 2 ways. Either we keep growing organically and it's going to be slow, or we go out, raise more capital. This is the growth plan. We raise more capital. And that means that we can do other things. We can expand our manufacturing capacity, which we are doing right now. We can for sure expand the sales organization because that was really too thin. Invest some money in pilots. And that's really going to accelerate the whole business. And that's really the choice that we made. Went out for new investors in 2023 and closed the funding rounds end of 2023 and then halfway 2024. And while I'm telling you this sounds real simple. It's not.
If I'm right, that fundraise comes with a plan for world domination by 2028, where you're reaching 40 million of sales. What's your basis today?
Around 5. The plan also calls for like plus 50, plus 100% annually. And I know that's a challenge. That's a big challenge. We know that. The sales organization knows that. With the development that we've gone through in the last couple of years, the OEMs and partners that we have been able to develop, and the fact that we're just doing like this in a huge world, I think the potential is definitely there.
I did the quick maths because I had the conversation with Peter Yols from Unbreakable Capital about, is it possible to do 100 pigs in water tank? I think was super convinced it is. And I have to look at the track record in history, and the track record in history says that even 10x has never been done. I just did stupid maths, and when you do stupid maths, doing a 100x is a 1.7x every year. So when you say you're stuck by 5, and the goal is to be at 40 in 2028, you're above that growth rate needed to feed a 100x. So what you're aiming to do is very ambitious.
Oh yeah, it is. It is. And it is challenging. I think the market is there. I think the market is growing. There's a lot of pressure on this.
Which brings me to another name drop, which is actually a theory from Christopher Gasson from GWI. His theory is that membranes is in water tech the closest thing there is to tech without water, because you can put money on it to grow it, and then you can have that scale effect because costs drop, and then you have market adoption, and you have repeat sales. My question actually is, where do you see the ceiling or sky being the limit? Where do you want to head with BlueFoot membranes? What's the long-term goal? Is it world domination, saying that is how we do NPRs, points? Or at some point, are you becoming like the jewel in the crown of one of the big guys?
Now you're asking me to pull out my crystal ball. What I have been pretty adamant about, certainly in this stage of the company, is that I'd really like to have my hands free. So that's why in this stage of the company, we've said, I really don't want any strategic investors in the company, because that's going to restrain us. What the future brings, I don't know. We'll see. I really have my doubts with all these consolidation efforts, because I really don't think it makes individual companies perform better. I've been there myself.
Yes, you lived through the pantry.
Yeah, I think there's a real risk of suffocating companies that have a great product while sort of assimilating them in a big company.
You're more lending towards word domination yourself.
Your words, not mine.
If you do reverse engineering, what needs to happen in the next 12 months?
Setting up partnerships, expansion of the sales organization, at the same time working with the existing partners that we have on projects, and we have quite a nice pipeline outstanding at this moment. And expansion of manufacturing. And expansion of manufacturing is something that we're investing in right now.
So that's on the way.
Yeah, it is. It is.
When is it going to be live?
About the end of Q3, early Q4 this year.
Okay.
Yeah, 2017 to 2020. This product was taken out of the lab. It's manufactured now. We're at a certain stage of manufacturing. We put in a lot of quality control, especially in the last 4 years. Complete trackability and traceability of whatever it is that we do. And now we're into a next step of much more robotize it and automate the whole manufacturing process. A logical next step in our evolution as far as manufacturing is concerned. And that's gonna for sure have a lot of advantages on the quality side, on the delivery side, on the cost side.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for the deep dive. To round those interviews off, I have a set of rapid fire questions.
It's time for the rapid fire questions.
What is the toughest challenge, in your opinion, for a water tech startup?
Inertia. It's not a surprise, but it may be a bit of a frustration for me is that the water sector is still fairly slow to adopt. I think it's sort of speeding up, but still fairly slow to adopt, while the pressure on the water sector is huge. It is a license to operate for everybody who uses water, companies, municipalities, individuals. This is the most important resource.
What would be your best single piece of advice for the founders and managers of the about 1,000 early-stage water startups?
Like I said, never give up.
Can I challenge that one? I don't want to challenge in the opening, because water companies don't die, and maybe they should. Where I'm heading with that is that you can be building something in the desert and thinking, oh, inertia, oh, everybody tells me it's slow to adapt it. But sometimes you should give up. And
I know where you're getting from, but that's not really what I mean. Because obviously, if the prerequisites are not there, if for example your economical model just doesn't work, then by all means don't continue, because it's a dead end. What I mean is, I think in a startup company or in a scale-up company, there are so many things that are on your plate as a founder or a leader in that company, which is rather overwhelming. And that's why I'm saying never give up, because there's going to be many challenges. You will be talking to your investors. They will be challenging you on things. You can't give up. If you're convinced of your product, if you're convinced of the markets, continue by all means.
What's the drop of knowledge you wish more investors knew about the water sector?
I've talked to many investors. I was kind of surprised by, in a number of instances, the lack of knowledge, intimate knowledge of the water sector, the dynamics in the water sector, the fact that the water sector is not so fast to adopt new technology, but also very project oriented, and things happen in projects. Companies have permitting issues and you have a delay. The realization for investors, what's very important is this is not a software as a service solution. This is not a sector, unless you're in operations, that you have recurring revenues every single month that are growing steadily. You got to be ready, I think, for that dynamic. If you are, then sure, it's a good place to be in.
What was your most unexpected partnership, and what did it bring you?
I think that was with one of the partners that we set up, where I thought we'd have difficulties convincing them of the technology, and I was kind of surprised by the easiness of them adopting the new technology once we sort of gone through the rhythm of presenting the product, skepticism on the other side of the table, saying, okay, well, let's just do a paper comparison between our product and what you have right now. And then you sort of, over the course of time, you see people's eyes opening. Okay, well, maybe it's not that bad. Okay, now let's pilot. Then we do a pilot with this company for the first time. Obviously, things go wrong in the wastewater treatment plant. The whole pilot, clogs up, and then the operator gives you a call. Yeah, I did this and this, I cleaned it, and now it's running again. and again, say, oh wow, wow, oh well, that sounds good. and that went pretty fast, and I think that's magical to see that happen.
Super short profitability or growth?
Short-term growth, long-term profitability, medium-term profitability, I should say. Yeah.
Okay. I agree to that. What is the next profile you'll hire?
I just did. My Chief Commercial Officer, Chris King, who's around here as well. Very important for us to strengthen the commercial organization. We need to have a strong leader there. I'm really happy that Chris decided to join us.
So now that you have a Chief Commercial Officer, all your positions are closed, or do you still have openings?
We have openings. The next one is going to be strengthening the sales support group. So hiring somebody there as well, or multiple people actually. Because again, it comes down to supporting our customers on the technical side, and that group needs to grow.
As always, if that's you, the link is in the description. When you hire, especially for that CCO role, are you looking for sector experience or startup experience?
Sector experience for sure, because you need to know the water sector, and for our particular company, you definitely need to have experience in membranes, and also in, let's say, an OEM partnership setting. That's really important. I'm not particularly looking for people with startup experience. I am looking for people that are, how do I say this in a nice way, not infected with the corporate virus.
To say agile, open-minded.
Yeah. Because a lot of things is heading your way, and you don't have like this huge support organization around you doing work for you.
What is that tool nobody speaks about, but you could not live without?
Our most important tool is our technical capability. The way that we can work together with our customers on the technical side. Because again, implementation matters, proper operation matters.
You don't just know stuff about textiles and polymerics, you know stuff about the process, so you can discuss with customers.
Exactly.
What is the single piece of insight your ideal customer profile needs to hear right now, and you can speak directly to them?
All of our customers, all of our end customers really need to realize that water is your license to operate. Water is your license to operate if you're an industry, if you're a municipality, if you're an individual. And I think the value of water is hugely underestimated. As humankind, we really need to be very wary of.
And now if we're even more specific, because we are at Aquatech, if someone is crossing your booth, bumps into you, and you just write one or two sentences to convince them to maybe have a longer discussion or to work with you. And again, you can talk to them directly. What do you tell them?
Water reuse is key. To do your water reuse, you need wastewater treatment. MBRs are a very good solution for that. And I think we provide the most robust and reliable solution for that at the lowest total cost of ownership. So let's have that conversation and see how we can solve your particular issue.
Stephan, thanks a lot for taking time at Aquatech, of all places where you have so much other stuff to do. So I'm really thankful for the time. Let's check when you dominate the world in 2028.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. So thanks.
Thanks for listening to Don't Waste Water. This podcast was brought to you by GF Piping Systems. Loved this episode? Head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. See you next time.